Okay, where are we at? Here? Should I stand here? Sorry. Ugh. It does seem weird being so close to the camera and standing up, but you can actually see kind of my whole setup here. I'm trying not to be too fancy, but I'm also still experimenting with look. Here it is, and here's my new shirt with flamingos on it because I needed something to help me pop. But now that I've gotten a sheet hung up instead of just the black acoustic blanket, I kind of blend into this too. I wanted to talk about what to do with my hands, even though you can't see them. I wanted to talk about creativity and how you're probably more creative than you think you are. I really feel like the only thing that you really need to be creative is have an opinion, which that might rub you the wrong way, but hear me out. So I think the difference between being opinionated and being creative is craft, or the ability to actually put your thoughts into or the ability to manifest your thoughts in the real world via art or whatever. And it doesn't have to be art. People that are mathematicians, people that are scientists, people that are engineers, all of these people are creative. But because you're probably a musician if you're watching this, let's just talk about the first time that you thought, man, I would have done that differently whenever you heard a piece of music. It may have taken you a while. You may have had to have heard hundreds of songs and have attempted to play hundreds of songs before you ever thought, I really wouldn't have put that fill there. But that's the building blocks to having your own voice. Having an opinion about something else and the work ethic to work out that idea enough so that if you were put in that same situation or a similar situation, you could express that difference of opinion in real life. Obviously, you have to work on the technical aspects of music enough so that you can be clear with your ideas. But let's say that you have that already. If you're not feeling creative, all you really have to do is think to yourself, I wonder if I took this one thing and changed it. If you change one thing about something that you hear, that's being creative. Now, that might be a limited way of thinking about creativity, but I think it starts there because we don't live in a vacuum. We are all influenced by each other. And because we're all influenced by each other, it's really hard to kind of be 100% creative. We're all kind of just collages, taking pieces from other people's magazines and trying to make something unique and individual. Unfortunately, all art, if it's a collage, has that collage-y type of look. I mean, you could prove me wrong. I'm not really into collage art, but for the sake of analogy, if you see a collage, you kind of know it's a collage. You can listen to a musician and say, oh, this person listened to a lot of jazz, this person listened to a lot of hip-hop, because we are what we eat in that sense. But just because we all eat at the same restaurant or the same 5 restaurants, that doesn't mean that we're all going to pick the same dishes from the menu. And those collective decisions, coupled with the experiences from playing with other musicians, because sure, we can listen to the songs that we want to listen to, we can study the drummers that we want to study, but whenever we are in a musical situation and we're playing with other musicians, we have no idea what they're influenced by. They're being an influence on us. I think that is kind of magical. That really does make us truly unique as individual players. But we have to learn how to lean into that uniqueness, how to not practice our way out of the things that make us special. once you understand what you want, once you understand what you're trying to do on the drum set or whatever instrument that you play, you have to protect it. And sometimes you have to protect it against yourself. Sometimes you don't need to learn that flashy lick that you just saw on Instagram or YouTube. Sometimes you don't need to learn a new pattern just because it's popular and everyone else is doing it. Are you really interested in that pattern? Are you really interested in that fill or that phrase? Are you really interested in that style of music? I'm not being an advocate for ignorance here. I'm trying to urge you to think about who you are and what it is that you want. Because what it is that you want and the things that you like, your personal tastes as a musician, your opinions as a musician, are the things that are going to inform your creative process. So I hope that helps. I know that's really, really short and kind of weird. I think I went into a couple of tangents there. I'm still trying to get used to standing up and talking instead of sitting down and talking. So if I'm moving a little bit too much to the right or the left, oops. So I feel like I have to catch you guys up with what's been going on in my life before I get started with the lesson. First up, I have had not one, but two podcasts with Drumeo Gab, Drumeo Gab now. And the first time was with a bunch of other drummers that I respect and admire at NAMM, and it was just a blast. I had only talked to a few of those guys prior on social media, but I've never met any of them in person, and it was also my first time at the NAMM show. I went out there with a couple of musicians that I play with in Winston-Salem, Matt Sickles and John Ray, and also I met Adam Moses, who's a friend of mine that lives in New York now, also has a book out which you should buy, and my friend Josh Wyatt. We all sort of converged on California together. It was just absolutely amazing. The first time I met the people that I went to meet, I was greeted with warmth and sincerity and hospitality, and everyone that I met, everyone was so kind and so nice, and I definitely would suggest going. First of all, if you're from North Carolina, which the weather can do really, really weird things. California, Anaheim, around that time of year, I mean, I guess I'm not sure if it's like that all year, but when we went, it was gorgeous. We went from 30, 40 degree weather to high 60s, low 70s, and it was just beautiful. The city is gorgeous. We caught a show in LA, which was really cool. I saw Animals as Leaders and Dana Hawkins and Evan Marion open for them, and Dana's one of my favorite musicians, and that was fantastic. Saw Charlie Hunter the first night of NAMM and hung out with the boys. So my impressions of NAMM are a little mixed. I didn't go out there for drum endorsements or to get discovered. I know that's sort of cliche at this point. People come from all around and play at every single booth just hoping to catch somebody's attention. And my experience going out there to meet somebody was definitely a lot different, because the first thing that was said after hello was, "Hey man, do you want to get out of here and grab a beer?" And we spent a fair amount of our time drinking and talking just about things, getting to know each other, not really talking about much at all, shooting the shit for the most part. So if you're not a good conversationalist and you want to work, I would work on your conversational skills, at least enough that you are interesting to hang out with. I've heard that step one to networking is you have to be a good hang, and that doesn't mean putting on airs, because a lot of times these guys, when they meet so many people, they have a sense, or you can develop a sense of whether a person is genuine or not. And, you know, you don't want to be a yes man, but you also don't want to be a dick. So I guess, you know, learn how to be social when you have to, but just be yourself, I guess. At least that's what's helped me so far, at least get along with the people that I've met. So NAMM, in a nutshell, fantastic. I will go again, not just because it was fun, but the stuff that I drooled over was an audio video, which, if you know me, I'm sort of I like that kind of thing, especially just drooling over gear. But I have the drums that I want, which brings me to the second thing that's happened. I am now an endorser of Reverie Drums. And Reverie Drums is owned by Timothy Roberts, who lives here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And they are some of the best drums that I've ever heard and the best drums I've ever played. He builds drums for a friend of mine, Chazare, and I got a chance to play his drums, and he was so kind to lend me a set of drums when he recut the bearing edges to my sonar kit. And he would have me over and test out drums or test out some of the stack ring stuff because he owns stack ring percussion as well. And I just fell in love with the way his drums sound, and I fell in love with how easy they are to play. And it's definitely just him, right? So, okay, I just lost my light. 1 second. You can't plan this. Luckily, I have multiple batteries. There we go. Oh, this is a ton brighter. Shot's gonna look way different now. Where was I standing? About here. Timothy Roberts, Reverie Drums. There are a couple of clips. I'll actually play a clip for you so you know what they sound like. I think they sound incredible. I was actually told to not avoid drum endorsements, but not necessarily to seek them out. Because if you're a touring musician, drum endorsements, at least by major companies, make sense. Because if you're trying to go from place to place and you need a drum kit to meet you at a place, then you have an infrastructure there, hopefully, to support you. But with a boutique company like Reverie, I know the guy. I've had conversations with the guy. I like the idea of knowing the person that built my drums, and saying that he's from the same town that I live, and having a relationship with the guy, being able to talk and chat, and and he was such a cool guy. He helped me every step of the way to figure out what lugs I wanted and how everything was supposed to look, and I had a specific idea for certain aspects of it, and I trusted his aesthetic judgment on others because he's done this before. So Reverie Drums, look them up. They're incredible. I love the way they sound. And if you've sat through the theme song already, I re-recorded the theme song with the new drums, and they don't sound like the same drums that was in that little demo. You know, that open, jazzy type of woody sound. And so apparently they're fairly versatile, at least. I mean, I can work a touch of magic in post, but it's really, really simple to get everything to kind of like rock or pop or whatever, those types of sounds. So I'm done with that. Milestone number 1, I have a relationship with a drum company. So fantastic, and he's such a cool guy. I'm done for real. Point 3, I think. I didn't finish my first story. I ended up being on Drumeo Gab. That's right. And the first one was a round table with a bunch of other drummers. The first round of podcast of the first round of the round table podcasts were more of introductions to all of us, because some of us are lesser known. You can't see my hand. Some of us are lesser known than others. So I was grateful just to be in that room. But I was also, I don't know how this happened. I like to talk, and I also like to teach. And so we were talking about some concepts in the living room while there was a group of guys doing their podcast, and I ended up doing a lesson, sort of impromptu, and the guys in the house liked it enough that got Seamus's attention. So he had me back on recently for my own standalone episode, and so I gave a more fleshed out version of that lesson there. And I'm not going to re-release it here just because I want that to kind of be his thing. I may talk about things like that in the future, but that's hint for him, so I'm going to leave that alone. Seamus has been he's been a really cool advocate for me, and likewise with a lot of other people like me being lesser known drummers that don't really have backing or whatever. I've never been on a big tour or anything like that, but he's a really cool guy, and you need to listen to his podcast. So that was part 1, part 2. The third thing that happened is these guys I lifted up the box, and you have no idea where this box is from. Movement Drum Company sent me a practice pad. Just said, hey, we would like to give you a practice pad. Give me your address. And that's the first time that's ever happened. And I've never done the whole unboxing thing. So I'm going to kind of try to do that. Bear with me. Oh, there's a box inside this box. I'm gonna lift this up so you can see it. This is kind of cool, right? It's in focus now. Fantastic. Focus peaking is the best. So it is very black. There we go. Oh, okay. So apparently it has, you can change these guys out, which is pretty cool. Sorry, I have no idea what's happening. There's a practice pad under this practice pad. That's interesting. So I guess this is more of like a resistance training because it's sort of soft. And I'm assuming that you could also hit this side as well. Pardon me. So yeah, it's kind of nice. So that practice pad's pretty cool. It's really springy. It definitely would probably help me get my finger technique together a little bit. So I tend to use the reflex pad when I use a practice pad, but this thing is the polar opposite to the reflex practice pad. If you're wanting to work on your rebound strokes and just get as loose and relaxed with as much like spring and stuff, which is something that I need to work on personally, it's a really good and substantial type of pad. It doesn't really feel like it'd move around on you because it's kind of heavy. This is definitely something that I would keep in my studio. I don't think that I would travel with it just because of the weight. But it feels really good to play. So check it out. After my last lesson on metric modulation, a lot of people asked me, how in the world can I practice metric modulation? What are the first steps that I can take in order to get a handle on the concept? And unfortunately, didn't really have a good answer for you. I never really used hacks in order to get my way into metric modulation. It was definitely the, hey, you start with a quarter note, you subdivide that quarter note, you group that subdivision into another number of notes that doesn't equal the subdivision that you're playing in, and boom, you're off to the races. Well, I discovered over the past few months what I want to call pivot rhythm. What I want to call pivot rhythms. A pivot rhythm is something that can kind of mean two things, almost like a rhythmic pun. But it takes a little bit of messing around in order to understand. For instance, people have been getting into Dilla beats, and people have been using a bunch of different avenues to get to that, right? Some people have been trying to just displace certain notes by a value, like a 16th note or a 16th note triplet. Or they'll think about just pushing and pulling certain notes until they get that effect. Other people have been practicing more angular odd rhythms to get that in-between feeling, like quintuplets and septuplets. And with quintuplets and septuplets, you have the ability to shift beats that you usually play, by beats I mean grooves, in 16th notes or triplets, and assign them to the closest quintuplet or septuplet. So while practicing quintuplets, I noticed that I wanted it to sound kind of swung, but not really, right? And so I had to figure out what rhythm I was emulating. Am I going to try to emulate like a straight rhythm, 1 and 3 and 4, or am I going to try to simulate a swung rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4? And I think that with quintuplets, it's actually really easy to do the latter because of the angular nature of it. So let me show you my conversion from a swung groove to a quintuplet groove. This also works for eighth note grooves and in quintuplet grooves. hopefully you could hear my shift in perspective with it. What gets hairy is now that we have that conversion, we can explore weird and different types of metric modulation. So I want to teach you one more pivot rhythm I use and how to get from that to, let's say 3. So here's another one I use, and I play this all the time. So it's 1 note, space, 2 notes, space, all even. By slurring the spacing between the 5s, we get back to 3 because we're physically playing 3 notes. That may take a little bit of time to get, but once you can slide back and forth between that 5-note spacing and a 3-note spacing, you have an easy access point from triplets to triplets. Sorry, I think I said from triplets to triplets. Once you get that down and get the transitions together, you have an easy access point, or you can pivot from triplets to quintuplets. Am I still in focus? There we go. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We're going to stretch or slur those 3 notes over that 5/16 spacing to get a triplet feel in 5/4. This can be done with so many things. For example, here's a 7-note pattern that I do. The 7-note patterns, 3 notes, 1 space, 2 notes, 1 space. But if you slur all those notes together, you get 5 evenly spaced notes over 7. Right? I know you can't tell, but here's a reference for you. And then rinse and repeat, right? So you can apply grooves to this, you can phrase, you can apply stickings of other note groupings on top of that, and so you get these weird detached, I guess the word that I would use if you were going to use it for a groove, I would call this diagonal metric modulation. A friend of mine once explained to me the difference between horizontal and vertical modulation. So horizontal modulation, my eye's twitching. Horizontal modulation is a modulation across bar lines. So an implied 5 or an implied 6 or an implied swung or shuffle rhythm in 4/4, the subdivision that you're playing doesn't change. You're taking the information that you're already given, that is either 16th notes or 8th notes, and you're using that to imply a different time signature. In vertical modulation, you would change note rates so you would have a shared 1 with the previous time signature. Vertical modulation, I think, is when you do both. Is when you change subdivisions, but you're also playing across the bar line without a shared 1. So subdividing 5, which is already a cross rhythm if you're playing in 16th notes in 4/4, into smaller or larger groups accomplishes that goal. So usually when I go into stuff like this, I recommend a book. This time I'm going to recommend Sticking Patterns by Gary Chaffee. If it weren't for this book, I wouldn't really be talking about any of this stuff because it definitely opened my eyes as far as phrasing over different amounts of notes go. However, it really talked about one perspective here, right? And so the spacing of 5, or subdividing the 5-note spacing with other things inside another time signature, wasn't something that was covered. He really just covered the basics. It was, like 4 against 3, things against 2, 3, and 4, which, arguably you could go through your life and not really need any of those things. But I don't think, if you know me, you're here to get what you need. You're here because you like rhythm and maybe hearing me talk. Oh, there's one more thing that happened in between now and the last time I saw you guys. I got a chance to jam with Charlie Hunter, and that was kind of cool. He's kind of funky. I'm not sure if you knew. So I want to thank you guys for watching this week, and hopefully this will hold you guys for a while, because who knows the next time I'm going to do this. The music that you heard throughout the episode was my band Brave World Trio, which is Daniel Seraph and Court Winter. Daniel helped us build a local gig in Winston-Salem. We've been doing it for a little over 4 years. And now my buddy Matt Sickles is on that gig. But Daniel was really instrumental in helping us sort of figure out what we want that night to be. And we recorded a record. And it's all covers of jazz songs that we put together, and that we sort of figured out in the moment, and things that the specific types of arrangements that we have are things that were basically done by trial and error. It's available for the most part where you buy music, so check that out. Also, my buddy and bandmate John Ray came out with a record. It's the John Ray Quintet. It's called Vintage Astronaut. I'm playing drums on that, and you guys can check that out on his website, johndanielray.com. I think I'll correct myself if I need to. And let's see what else. I do offer Skype lessons. You guys can hit me up if you're interested at gmail.com. That's all I have for you today. So you guys be well, and maybe I'll come up with a catchphrase one day.